Hey, good afternoon, Council and staff, those who are participating online. Welcome to the Council meeting of Tuesday, September 20th, 2022, to the afternoon portion commencing at 2:03 p.m. I'll call the Council to order and start with the adoption of the agenda and draw everyone's attention to the fact that we've added through addendum prior to today item 4.1, but we are removing item 4.2. And prior to reading that in, I'll turn to our CAO for a brief explanation.
The item for in-camera discussion that we were asking to be removed was the Bridgewater OLT item, and it's our intention to remove it today, but to bring it back to council with some more information at a meeting to come up in the near future.
Great, thank you. For the public that are perhaps watching, I have regrets this afternoon from Councillor Madigan and Councillor Carrier. My understanding it is that Councillor Carrier's intent to join us for the late afternoon evening session starting at 5 p.m. And remotely we have Councillors Berman and Doherty participating online. So with that, the motion to adopt the agenda, that the content of the council agenda for September 20th, 2022 be adopted as amended. And again, we've got the in-camera matter added, and that's 4.1, the water treatment plant expansion, and the removal of item 4.2, which is the item that is related to Bridgewater OLT appeal. Can I get a mover and seconder for that, please? I have Councillor Jeffrey and I have Councillor Hamlin. Are there any questions before I call the vote? Seeing none, all those in the affirmative. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. This afternoon, under item 3, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's item 9.2. In that item, there's a list of properties, the last of which is 11 Golfview Drive. And as I live on Golfview Drive, I wanted to excuse myself as having a...
Perfect. Thank you. And the clerk's department was kind enough to separate that item out for me, and it has been noted, so I appreciate it. Anyone else? Okay, that then takes us to the purpose of being here this afternoon, and that is to proceed in camera. And the item is, whereas the clerk hereby concurs the reasons for the in-camera session have been duly reviewed and considered, and the matters are authorized under the exception provisions to conduct a closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act prior to proceeding into closed session. Therefore, be it resolved that this council proceeds in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to, and the items, and then I'll go back for discussion, would be A, the CAO bylaw legal advice, item C, townhomes of Prairie River housing proposal, item D, the property acquisition, item E, the water treatment plant expansion. And at the outset under the agenda, we referred to 4.1, 4.2, not B and E. The 4.1 and 4.2 refer to the agenda that is part of the in-camera agenda. So the items, therefore, are the security of the property of the town or local board, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including town or local board employees, that would be item A, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposal of land for the town local board purposes, that would be items C and D. Litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the town or a local board, that would be items C and D. The receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, items would be A, C, and E. Position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiation carried on or to be carried by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. Those items are C, D, and E. Trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board, which, if disclosed, could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of a person, group, or persons or organization, and that item would be E. Can I get a mover and seconder? Got our acting deputy mayor, and I've got Councillor Hamlin. Thank you both. And question, yes, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. So my question is that council's been receiving multiple requests with respect to presenting to council in camera on an item. And I don't know if it's appropriate, if it never goes on the agenda, whether I can ask about it in camera or whether it has to be asked in the public realm under other business. And then I'm not sure if staff can even answer because it's a request for in camera. So in my mind, I've been doing this chicken and egg thing, and I was just wondering what the answer might be.
Okay. I'm going to suggest that it's not on the agenda, therefore can't be within camera, but I'll look for clarification from our clerk.
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. It is not on the agenda this evening. I believe our CAO does have some comments regarding the request, if you want further clarification. But it unfortunately is not on the agenda today, so it can't be spoken to.
Go ahead, CAO.
Thank you also through the chair to Councillor Jeffrey. Yes, if you'd like something put on an in-camera agenda, of course, where you can do so. In the case of some requests, it would make sense to have the town solicitor to talk to some of the implications. And if you made the request to the clerk, then we'll make sure that the appropriate arrangements are made regarding council getting an update.
And as a follow-up, thank you, Mayor Hall, through to the CAO. And I know it's one that has been going to the clerk and to the CAO, the request. And I know it's a request to happen before the end of September. And I know that it's passed many dates in previous requests. So I don't want to make the request too late. But I just want to know that we're on top of it and that it will happen and is being scrutinized as the appropriateness of the in-camera request. So I guess this is my request to put it on the agenda as well.
Okay. So I have the confidence that our CAO and clerk know the matter, and we'll take that advisement then. Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So with that, I do have a mover and seconder then for the items to take us in camera. Are there any further questions, clarifications? Seeing none, then all those in the affirmative. And that's carried unanimously. So at 2:11, we'll rise and we'll move across the hall and take us in camera. Thank you. If I can get a mover and seconder to take us out of in camera and rise and bring us back into the public session. So I'm looking for a mover and seconder. Got the acting deputy mayor, and I've got Councillor Doherty. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Clerk Almus, just for the record, this afternoon we started at 2 o'clock. And Councillor Madigan has provided regrets for both this afternoon and this evening. And I had Councillor Carrier arriving at 3:23 to the private, or in camera, I should say. And I had Councillor Hamlin leaving at 3:30, and of course is now back with us in the public session. So with that, I would like to welcome council, staff, and members of the public, those both in the chambers as well as perhaps joining us online this evening. And thank you for being here. We'll bring our council for Tuesday, September the 20th, 2022 to order. And I'll start with our reading of the land acknowledgement. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabek, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who are families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationship it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation. Before I move to the adoption of the minutes, I just would like to also make it known that we have 5 of us in person, and Councillor Doherty and Councillor Berman are participating virtually this evening. And there were 2 amendments to the original agenda today that were passed. Both of them pertain to in-camera items. So the public session or the public agenda remains as was publicly printed. So that, look for an adoption of the minutes that the regular meeting of council held August the 18th, 2022. The minutes of the council meeting held August 18, 2022 be approved as presented. Could I get a mover and seconder? Got the acting deputy mayor, and I've got Councillor Hamlin. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Is there any business arising from the previous minutes? Seeing none, take us to our community announcements. And council, with your permission, I'm going to start as opposed to going last. For the past 10 days, the world has turned their attention to the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And during those 10 days, there has been accolades as to her reign, the 70 years of service, public service, and the contributions that she has made to her country, to Great Britain, and the world as a whole. Last evening, the town of Collingwood lost a gentleman by the name of Harold Zuckerman. Harold Zuckerman was born in 1926. In 2013, Harold was awarded the Order of Collingwood, and in 2019, he was awarded the Companion to the Order of Collingwood. The Order of Collingwood has been something that was established many years ago to recognize service to one's community, and the Companion was to recognize ongoing service to those who were a member of the order. In 1986, and this is a story that was shared with me, Mr. Zuckerman, after a successful career, retired. And his late spouse, Joyce, after quickly learning that Harold had intended to spend most of his time home working on crafts and reading, suggested that perhaps something outside of the home would be better served. Harold was a member of the YMCA, and in 1986 started a long established relationship with the Y in service. One of the things that he championed was developing programs within the community for persons of his age or demographic. And as he continued to age, he looked to develop programs that would reflect those ages. He is, and I think that for those who had the opportunity to meet him, I met him on many occasions, is the real deal. He is perhaps one of the most genuine, kind, gracious individuals that anyone could meet. And on behalf of Council and the Corporation of Collingwood, I would like to extend my condolences to his family, to his friends, and to the community. Mr. Zuckerman is a true gentleman, and he will be missed. And with that, again, I offer my sincerest condolences. And with that, Acting Deputy Mayor, I'll turn to you, and then I'll go through the table for announcements.
Thank you so much for those moving words. I have a couple of community announcements to make today. One of which is what a thrill and a pleasure it was to represent the town at the awards ceremony on Saturday night for the Special Olympics Alpine ski team. They were thrilled to be able to gather again for the first time in 2.5 years. With a lovely meal and awards for all of the athletes and honors for the families and the coaches and so on. They are still looking for more coaches. So if there are people who want to get involved in their community, the Special Olympics are looking for enough coaches to get 18 young athletes who want to be on the team onto the hills this year. I'd also like to talk about an opportunity this weekend, which is the Great Northern Exhibition, also known as the Collingwood Fair. It is not too late to become I want to say vendor, but it's not vendor, a person who shows their stuff, their quilts or their cookies or any of the other things that are on display at the fair. It will be a wonderful time, and they have ordered excellent weather. So let's hope that happens. Thank you so much.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just want to extend congratulations and thanks to the BIA and all of the merchants and services downtown who put on such a tremendous art crawl, 10th anniversary of art crawl. As always, the weather was fantastic. There was an excellent turnout. And I think that the only thing that could possibly make it better would be if it would be longer. So maybe next year there might be some consideration into extending it for more than one afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Hall, and thank you for the kind words about Harold. Saturday I was over at the Legion. It was the 50th wedding anniversary for John and Marie Stevenson. It was a nice event. There was certificates from Mayor Hall, from MPP Saunderson, and MP Dowdall was actually there to present his. So it was a nice celebration for everybody. And the other thing I want to talk about briefly is hockey. Some of you guys saw a story that came out a week or so ago about our local team, Collingwood Blues, being ranked number 2 in the country, not in the province, but in the country prior to the season starting. And they've opened with 3 home games that they won by a combined score of 18-4. It was a bit of a shooting gallery. And then they won their first road game yesterday by scoring 2 goals with less than 2 minutes left with the goalie pulled, the tying goal with 1 second left.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. Councillor Jeffrey.
Nothing additional this evening, Mayor Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Several years ago, the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay, which is a volunteer-led nonprofit, decided to put its efforts towards encouraging collaboration in the arts community. And on October the 2nd, they're having a launch party of the South Georgian Bay Arts Network. And this is a collaboration of a number of artists and art organizations across our region of some 100,000 people. The partners in this new arts network are, in addition to the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay, and also the partners include Theatre Collingwood, the Blue Mountain Foundation for the Arts, and the South Georgian Bay Tourism. So this will be held at the Collingwood Brewery, and everyone's invited to come and hear some artists. There'll be some poetry read and music and live dance and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. Councillor Carrier.
Your Worship, I've been traveling a lot lately, and I've been watching the community vicariously through Facebook and other postings, and I just would like to say that the chain of office looked very nice around your shoulders for the signing of the new Tecumseh Collingwood Water Agreement, and I hopefully get to see you wearing it more before the end of the term. It looks good on those shoulders. Thank you for those kind words about Mr. Zuckerman. Joyce and Harold were also members of the movie club, and it was so nice when she was in frail health. They would still come, and he would help her very gingerly to her seat, as the gentleman that he was and was. And unfortunately, with COVID, we've not seen some of the people that we are so used to seeing and interacting with over such a long time. And I did get the notice yesterday because I happened to be with a whole bunch of fire chiefs who did receive the notice via their communication. So it's my condolences also to their family. But thank you very much for your kind words.
Thank you. It is nice to see that we continue to open and have opportunities to get together to celebrate what not only Collingwood but the region has to offer. And I hope that people will have an opportunity to attend the Great Northern Exhibition, as the Acting Deputy Mayor has indicated. It is one of the longest standing traditions within this community and the region. If you haven't seen it, one of the heritage plaques that we have throughout our community depicts the picture or photo of the original or one of the original buildings at Central Park, which is adjacent. It'd be on the north side of our arena. And it was a spectacular structure. Like many things, it was destroyed by fire at one point. But the exhibition, although now moved to Clearview, had its origins within Collingwood, and is something that is clearly enjoyed by our youth and all. And again, I hope that you'll be able to celebrate because it is a fantastic event. And the art crawl, I hope that people did have an opportunity to attend this past weekend. It truly is a reflection of the community that you have standing traditions in place that continue to carry on, and that new opportunities move forward that celebrate the progressive direction that this community is headed in. And Councillor Berman, your reference to hockey, I'll just mention, you can't see the audience tonight, the gallery who are in attendance. If you're a hockey fan, you'll understand my reference, but there are more people here tonight, Councillor Berman, than there would be at a Arizona Coyote hockey game. So I don't know if the tickets were free, but we're sold out. So anyway. That takes us then to 8 on our agenda, Standing Committee Report. And the first one would be Corporate and Community Services of September the 6th, 2022. And I'll just read this in. The Council received the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee Report from its meeting held September 6, 2022, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. CCS 2022-11, Partners for Climate Protection, PCP, Program Update and Corporate Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Targets. Recommendation to direct staff to proceed with a minimum corporate greenhouse gas reduction target of 20% below 2019 baseline levels by 2030 to be incorporated into the town's corporate climate change action plan, and that the plan examine the implications of a net zero emissions target. The second is CCS 2022-12, closure of municipal administration offices during the 2022 holiday season. Recommendation to approve the seasonal closure of the municipal administration offices for 2022 and the ongoing closure of municipal administration offices during the holiday season. Can I get a mover and seconder to put this on the floor? Councillor Hamlin, and I've got Councillor Berman. Any questions from the table as it relates to either one of these reports this evening? I've got Councillor Hamlin, and then I've got Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to speak specifically to the staff report, if I can find the agenda again in this 300 pages, that relates to the climate action goals of our community. And I realize this did pass unanimously at the committee level. I have received, as everyone has, some correspondence from our climate action team in Collingwood about this. And so I'd just like to speak to it for a moment. I am of the view that our town did, declare, as a council, a climate emergency some years ago. And secondly, we have been fortunate enough to be asked by the UN to partner with them to achieve sustainable goals as a small town. And of all the small towns in the world, Collingwood was chosen, and we're about to have I think it's our third annual summit, it could be our fourth. This year, of course, we're going to focus on housing. But I do feel that of all communities, that we have an obligation to step up and do the best we can. And I have read the report and looked at the correspondence and given this some thought, and I do feel we can do better. I feel that 20% is very low. And it is difficult for me to understand where all these numbers fit in, because I do realize that some are targeting 2004 levels, 2018, 2006 in terms of reductions of greenhouse gas emissions. But I just think we can do better. And 20% seems so low. And some of the discussions we've had around this table several months ago, I recall we were asked to approve a budget measure to replace fluorescent lights with LED lights on the 10th Public Works building. And there was a payback in 5 years, but the reduction in energy use was astounding. And when I asked whether there are still more lights to be done in town buildings, the answer was yes, but we're on a very managed program for that. And these are some of the things that I wonder if staff was to have another look at this. How far could we push this? If we did sit down and say, what if we changed all our light bulbs in the next 5 years? How much closer would we be? And certainly the payback was only 5 years for the ones in the Public Works building. So it's not necessarily we're going to bankrupt the town over taking harder and further steps. We just have to look at it differently. So I'm not in support of the staff report. I have recognized that Aurelia and Barry are looking at things a little more aggressively than us. And I would be moving that this matter be referred back to staff to come back with a more aggressive target for us to look at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hamlin. I had you as the mover and the seconder, and then we're going to go around, but I am going to take the liberty to split this out when it comes time to actually either vote or look for direction. Councillor Doherty, I believe I had you up next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I will echo Councillor Hamlin's comments. We in this community have purported to take a leadership role in the declaration of a climate emergency. And in all the things that we do, we have attempted in every way to demonstrate sustainability and to identify a target as low as 20% decrease versus 2019 is just, it's in my view, it is not reaching far enough. We have surrounding municipalities who are considering goals as much as 50% in just the space of 5 years, and I'm referencing specifically Aurelia. Although I will admit that that may be a very ambitious target, let us just at least consider what our national target is, the commitment that we made at COP26 for a 50% reduction or 40 to 45% reduction in GHG emissions versus 2005 and net zero for 2050. And we have made no reference whatsoever to a commitment to net zero and any target date for that. I also want to, actually, I'll back up and say I am not trivializing the effort that has been put forward by staff. This is our first attempt, and it was a well put together document. But I will echo again, Councillor Hamlin, we can do better. I truly believe we can do better. One of the reasons why a relatively low target has been stated is because of the growth that we anticipate and specifically a new water treatment plant coming on stream. But even with the expansion, significant expansion of our water treatment capabilities, there are ways in which we can mitigate or even absorb greenhouse gases in the construction of that facility, in the materials that we use, in consideration to installation of renewable energy generation on the roof, as an example, or a green roof. Again, we can do better. And I would be prepared to second the suggestion that we refer this report back to staff and have them come back with a reconsideration of this target. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Councillor Carrier.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was pleased with the report that staff presented at the committee in the context that we knew that this was a starting number or a starting over number. If we go back a number of years, Collingwood has always been an active and strong partner, and we've also had strong partnerships within the community. I look to the Environment Network, who more than a decade ago led numerous workshops on greenhouse gas emissions. We took all of us of councils of the day when Mayor Geddes was mayor, and then when I was mayor, we took tests and we took exercises and workshops on these things. We asked that the staff develop a car fleet policy that lessened emissions so that we didn't see somebody maybe who was doing bylaw enforcement driving around in a big Ford pickup truck, that they were actually driving in the smaller vehicles that you'll see today. Busing was a huge component of the plan in measuring greenhouse gas emissions way back, and that we made those significant investments with partners from the provincial and federal government. We did receive significant money to buy larger buses. We also had policy discussions at the council table about lowering bus fares. And we did lower bus fares. And what we saw with lowering bus fares was that ridership increased and our operation costs went down and our greenhouse gas emissions or even lessened more. So Collingwood, I don't want to ignore what we've done in the past because the staff did comment during their presentation to us at committee that some of the data sets that they wish they had, they did not have readily access to. So that this was an emphasis on starting anew, that we've already reduced our greenhouse gas emissions significantly. I want to talk about the library project as another example. The Collingwood Library project, when we built that building, we actually invested over 800,000 tax dollars into that facility to make it more environmentally sustainable and friendly. And we knew that the payback was going to be over 2.5 decades to get those monies back in energy savings and in emissions, but it was something that the council of the day and the community of the day was quite proud to do. It was actually part of an election issue way back in 2006 for the library campaign, but the council that I had the privilege to lead made that tough decision to make those investments. So in the context of the emails that we've received, I just want to emphasize that it's not that we have stood by and let our cars idle. It was at one of the councils that I sat on that we passed the anti-idling bylaw. There are a number of progressive and active things that this community has done with strong partnership from the community year over year. The staff recommendation, I'm in support of. I'd like to see a stronger data set as we move forward so that greater initiatives can be realized as technology comes online. Greater achievements can be made, but the local level is in charge of so much public infrastructure, and climate change is going to affect local infrastructure, and a lot of our resources are going to also have to go into mitigation measures. And so those are also investments that future councils are going to be asked to make. We can't just do all in one pot. It has to be in both pots. So I'm supportive of the recommendation from staff. I will continue to be supportive of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jeffrey?
A mind reader. Thank you, Mayor Hall. So I have to confess that I felt that the 20% seemed to lack a little bit of motivation in terms of recognizing all the things we've done in the past and moving forward and all the opportunities we have. It may be the right number, but I'm not opposed to having staff take one more look because I'm not sure where we're at in terms of what the numbers would be in terms of electrification of our bus transit system. I'm not sure where they would be if we actually got into our procurement bylaws and the buildings that we build as a town in terms of the concrete. You can reduce GHGs by 45% on one project based on the concrete you're using at no extra cost. There's so many ideas and keys they have through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities as to how municipalities can achieve this. So I think as far as just being sure that we're just not setting that bar too low, because I do agree with Councillor Hammond. I think and with Councillor Doherty, I think we can do better, but I would like to have staff take another look at these numbers and take those other initiatives under consideration and see if there are some things we can do that would speed that up, expedite our results.
Thank you. Yes, Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I have a question of clarification because I moved an amendment on this report when it came to the community corporate and community services standing committee, and I'd just like to get a clarification from perhaps either the clerk or the CAO, or even if our climate change specialist is in the House, because my understanding is that this recommendation is to direct staff to create a plan, that the plan is not set, that 20% is not set, that it is a minimum 20. And then the amendment that I got put in there was that we look at net zero, if at all possible, in the plan that we are directing staff to create. And through the mayor, I wonder if we can have some clarification on that, because I do believe net zero is on the table, because I think I put it there.
So having assumed the chair that particular meeting so that you could table your amendment, that is my understanding as well. But I'll go through the CAO, and I do see that we have some staff that have joined us. And I'll start with Director Peg, if I may, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Acting Deputy Mayor McLeod and Council. So certainly our climate change specialist, Ms. Yardy, did do robust research of the corporate and community targets that were set in order to come to our council with a recommendation. The intention is that this is a minimum for the corporate plan only, so not our community plan. Ms. Yardy has planned in the new year to be doing some community consultation that would include CCAT as valued contributors on the community plan. So the 20% again is corporate only and would be a minimum. So our intention would be to go away, do some analysis to allow us to continue to move forward with our PCP milestone, come back to council and show at 20%, this is the financial commitment. These are the types of activities we could do. At 25%, this would be the financial commitment. This is the type of activities we could do. And at net zero, this would be the financial commitment, and this would be the type of activities that we could do. So again, at that point, council could certainly direct us to, move forward with a higher target. Ms. Yardy also did confirm with the program coordinators that we can change our target. So once a target set, we have the opportunity to adjust it as we go. It's that the target is required for us to move forward to the next stage. I will also note around the LED lights, because I did hear Councillor Hamlin, I believe, reference that. It's certainly on our radar, and we've prepared in the 2023 budget and asked for council's consideration. Fleet and Facilities has looked at the program and done an analysis, and that particular project would be about $90,000. So that's included in the draft budget that will be before council for consideration. So I will, though, actually just ask, with your agreement, Chair, if Ms. Yardy could just speak to some of the analysis that she did around targets, and specifically possibly highlighting some of the pieces around Caledon, because I think they're a good example of the difference between a community target and a corporate target, because a number of municipalities have higher community targets than they do corporate, recognizing that there's a budget process to go through in order to set those. So not to put you on the spot, Ms. Yardy, but I'd appreciate if you could, with the chair's agreement, talk through a little bit of that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Director Peg, and welcome, Ms. Yardy.
Thank you, Mayor Hall, and thank you, Director Peg, for that introduction. So the process that we went through to determine this minimum 20% reduction target was to look at other municipalities and compare what their populations were, their level of ambition, their percent target versus what their baseline is, as well as their net zero target. We also talked to over 30 town staff people from different departments to discuss what could be done within individual departments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So if that was at the wastewater treatment plant, it could have been an operations adjustment that could be made. Those were very high level discussions, but that gave us a very good list of big projects that we could embark on in the future to work to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Within the review of other municipalities, the greenhouse gas reduction targets ranged from Kitchener, from our review, from Kitchener being, Kitchener's goal was 8% below 2016 levels by 2026. And that was our lowest one that we saw. ranging to the highest one was, I believe, Aurelia or Halton Hills that just went straight for net zero at 2030, and may have not put a midterm target in before that. So there are a lot of municipalities that are going for lower and higher reduction targets than the minimum 20% that you see before you. Speaking to what Executive Director Peg mentioned, Caledon as an example, they have a community target for a 36% reduction by 2030, and then their corporate target is less ambitious at 24% below 2017 levels by 2040. And they are a good example of a municipality who's gone through all 5 PCP milestones. So they've implemented their plan and they're monitoring at this point. They do have a different population and a different demographic than us, but they are a good example of someone who's gone through all of the steps at this point. And we are speaking with their staff to understand what their challenges were versus where their successes were.
Thank you, Ms. Yardy. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so as a follow-up to that, then, thank you, Mayor Hall. So my thought is that this actually is a referral back to staff that we are going through right now. And with respect, referring it back to staff is already happening. And we are looking at net zero as an option in the report that is to come, which I look very much forward to seeing. And I thank you very much. So I will be supporting this recommendation because I think it incorporates the comments made by all of our council today. So thank you.
Councillor Berman, you're the only one that hasn't spoken. Would you like to offer comment?
Thank you, Mayor Hall. I like all the comments that have been made around the table. The one thing that I wrote down, which I think we're all touching on, is that there's we want to be aspirational with this, but we don't want to make empty promises. So we don't want to just set a high number so that it will, impress people that they'll talk about us at other municipalities that are looking at this. I agree with everything that Deputy Mayor McLeod said in that this is the starting point. This is going to go back to staff. It does have the net zero amendment at the end of page 2 of 11. So I'm happy to support it the way that it is.
Okay. Thank you. And yes, Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to respond. What I've seen other municipalities do is they take they're a little more aggressive, I think, on their corporate targets. Like Barrie, for example, has gone to net zero. I think it's 2050. It's a ways out, but at least it's net zero. And then they go to the community and say, okay, now community, we set a really hard target for ourselves. What as a community can we do? And they settled in at, 46 or 48%. I'm sort of worried if we come in at 20 as our minimum, what are we going to say to our community? We expect you to do better. We expect you as a community to do 45% when in fact, we think we can do 20. So I'm going to just reiterate, I don't feel that this report goes far enough. And when I look at the amendment on page 2 of the staff report, if I'm reading this correctly, it doesn't say, let's go to net zero. What it says is, that the Climate Change Action Plan include calculations examining the impacts of a net zero target on the town of Collingwood Corporation going forward. So as I say, I'll just finish. I don't think this goes far enough, and I'd like to see more. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hull. So through to CAO Skinner, in terms of if what we're actually looking at is a refer back to staff, what kind of timeline are we looking at for a response as to an adjustment for that? What kind of timeline is that?
Sure. CAO Skinner.
I think I'd like to ask Executive Director Peg to address that one, please, through the chair to Councillor Jeffrey. It is a little theoretical at this point, only in that until we do the analysis to look at the implications of each target, setting a different target may be largely a desktop exercise, but I would like her to comment, please. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Executive Director Peg.
Thank you, CEO Skinner, and through you, Chair, to the councillor, or actually to all of council. So first of all, I misspoke. So thank you to one of my peers for pointing it out. The LED cost is $900,000, not $90,000. So forgot a zero, and I think that's an important thing to note. So I apologize for that. In terms of timelines, our intention is to get back in front of council as soon as possible. In working with our climate specialist, Yardi, and the fleet and facilities team, they are looking at some opportunities that will be presented to you with the proposed 2023 budget. Around getting resources to do some of the in-depth analysis that will be required. And by resources, I don't mean additional staff, just to make that clear, to help with some of that analysis. But it is our intention to come back to council either later in this year or early in the new year with some additional targets or an updated target with the financials associated with those numbers. And I don't know, Ms. Yardi, if there's anything that you wanted to add to that. No.
Follow up, Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mayor Hall. So I'm thinking in terms of the wording, and this may have to come after the motion we have, would be that the wording might be, rather than setting a minimum now, that it's a temporary minimum pending staff's further research, so that we're not fixing it at this point. We're making it a temporary one until we can get the proper research done to come up with what is an achievable one and set ourselves up for success. I don't know if that fits within the program and what you have to declare within it, but I'm just looking for a wording that would be less finite in terms of the 20%.
Is there an additional comment that could be added or just taken away? I'm through you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't say.
No? Okay.
No, I didn't know who I was going to ask to respond, so.
Okay. Through you, CEO, is there somebody that would like to respond to that, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that I'm not sure that if it is a question, yes, you could set a temporary minimum until the research is done if you wish to call it that. Certainly, I think that's somewhat what we've proposed, is that we set an analysis target at 20% so that we can do the costing, that to make sure that all the options presented hit a minimum of 20% reduction by the target date, and that we wouldn't be held to that. I did want to emphasize just briefly the tones of carbon that we're looking at from a corporate perspective are in the 3,000 and something range, and the tones of carbon at the community level are at 207,000. So while our corporate savings are important, they pale in comparison to the importance of acting at the community level as soon and as broadly as possible. So the report does also address some of the community consultations that are very important to I think, to council and to the folks concerned about about climate change in the coming months, because they will make a substantial difference as well on that front. Thank you.
You're okay, Councillor?
I am, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had, I think, Councillor Hamlin, and then I've got the Acting Deputy Mayor.
I'll hold for now, thank you.
Okay, Acting Deputy Mayor, and then I've got you, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to understand where we're at this point, because we are referring this back to staff. Staff is going away with minimum 20 and maximum everything, net zero, on the table for them to look at. And then the report that they're going to create for us before the end of the year is looking at each and every one of those, or not each and every, but looking at all the possible scenarios between 20% and zero, net zero. So I just want to be absolutely clear that that's what's on the table at this moment. And I think I am now. Is that where we're at? I'm getting a nod from the CAO, climate change specialist. Yardi, is that the task that you see yourself to have been given with this report that you came to us with? Through the
the
mayor.
mayor,
Please.
to acting Deputy Mayor McLeod. That is correct. So we're coming to council for direction, hoping to get an agreement on a minimum 20%, and then we will look at all options between minimum 20% and net zero in the draft corporate climate change action plan that will be in front of you early next year.
Thank you very much.
I've got Councillor Doherty, and then I've got Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you. I'm not seeing in this recommendation that we're going away to take a harder look at how we can achieve a 20% reduction, what that looks like, and what other reduction opportunities might be available to us. I feel honestly that we're equivocating here a little bit and maybe even amending on the fly. And I just would go back to the notion that I would like to refer this report back to staff to have another look at it and come back to us with a clear direction as to target and intent, because I'm not getting that from this report and this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Just to be clear, though, we're not amending on the fly. At Corporate and Community Services, there was a presentation and a recommendation, and in fact, it was amended at that time by the acting deputy mayor, and that's what we have in front of us tonight. And the net zero emissions target in the last sentence was part of that amendment. If there is a will or desire to send it back for staff for further, more concise direction, then that would be something that we could do here, but certainly not amending on the fly. Councillor Hamlin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My only comment is when I read the recommendation that we're being asked to approve tonight, I don't see the words there that reflect the intent that our acting deputy mayor has said that this means. And I would be prepared to consider if this was just getting started, report back, end of year, 20% is, minimum, we're going to try harder. But I'm not reading that in these words. It says, direct staff to proceed with a minimum corporate greenhouse gas reduction target of 20% below 2019 baseline levels by 2030 to be incorporated in the climate action plan. So it's nothing about reporting back, and this is a minimum. And I suspect that's what Councillor Doherty meant when she said we're amending on the fly, because, those words that I heard reflected might not be too bad, because it is along the lines of what I'm suggesting. We need to do better. We need staff to report back.
On a point of order.
Just a moment, please. With respect to what was just written, that is the recommendation that's on the table. However, the report does indicate some of the specifics that you have already outlined. And I think it has been confirmed tonight verbally by staff as to some of the commitments that they've made within the report as it relates to the timelines and some of the objectives that they would like to bring back forth for whether it be this council, which I doubt, given the timeline, or the new council in the new calendar year.
And just on the point of order.
Yes, sir.
Through you, respectfully to Councillor Hamlin, you only read a portion of the recommendation, and the final part of that sentence was, and that the plan examine the implications of a net zero emissions target, which is what staff spoke to. So you only read a portion of that, and I would hate the audience to be misled that we stopped at that where you stopped speaking. The final portion was there, and staff, in my mind, have clarified that they are going to bring back a report that goes from 20 to 0, and there's the implications of implementing it. It's addressed. I respectfully submit it's addressed your concerns.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, my point in not reading the last sentence is I already referred to that in some detail the last time I spoke, so I didn't want to bore people with reading it again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. I'm going to ask a simple, I just have one question of our CAO. The word timeline has been used a number of times this evening, not only in reference to this report, but to others. This obviously has significant budget implications, and you as a CAO and your leadership team are already in the process of establishing the budget for this and the next council to take a look at. So how do the two reports, or I should say, how does this and the budget that you're working on align with one another so that the public kind of understand where they're headed, and if they're headed sort of in alignment with one another?
Thank you, Your Worship. That's a somewhat complex question. Thank you for asking it. We do have a reserve fund that was set aside from the sale of the assets that this council created. That is being held for major initiatives that would help us to address climate change, either through mitigation or adaptation. So that piece is there and accessible to sitting council. There was some direction provided by council, for example, the LED lights question that was referenced by Councillor Hamlin earlier, where we've prepared individual costing for pieces of work proposed for 2023, and our normal processes whereby we're looking at purchasing, for example, electric or hybrid vehicles where we can, or implementing ongoing low carbon solutions are in the draft budget as we've prepared it. Are in the process of preparing it. It hasn't come forward to council yet. That said, what we're looking at today is a notional target of what we would plan to. So be that 20% as the lowest option today, or maybe today you change that to a different percent, maybe 30% is the one that would make people comfortable. The implications of that will come out in the report that will come to council, we hope, early in 2023. So if there were major investments to, change how we treat our drinking water, for example, that required investment, or handle our rinks or pools, they would be costed separately and would be a known factor in the decision that council might make around the targets and when they'd like those targets met. That would be part of the future proposed plan, or the plan options that you would choose from.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, CAO Skinner. So we have had a good discussion on this particular matter, and with your indulgence, I'm going to try and walk through this because I had actually read in, and I have a mover and seconder for the two reports. Clerk Almas, I'm taking the liberty of severing the second part out, and I'll circle back to that in a minute because I don't think that will be the discussion that we've had so far. But as it relates to the matter that's on the table right now, I do have a mover in Councillor Hamlin. I still have a seconder in Councillor Berman. And it has been tabled. Is anyone prepared to offer a different direction, amendment at this time? Councillor Hamlin?
So perhaps if I've moved to put this on the floor, I shouldn't be moving an amendment. Would this be a problem? I just look over through you to the clerk.
Thank you. Through your worship, I would agree you should look for a different mover.
Yeah, thank you. I'll withdraw my moving of this motion. Thank you. And then I do have an amendment.
Okay. I'll look for then a new mover. I've got Councillor Carrier and seconded by Councillor Berman. Thank you. And I'll come back to you then, Councillor Hamlin, to table an amendment or a different direction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be moving that the recommendation before us be returned to staff for a review of the minimum greenhouse gas reduction target. Yeah.
And do you have a seconder? I've got, you're offering to be a seconder, Councillor Doherty? Yes? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any questions of the amendment that has been tabled? And just for clarification, if the amendment is passed, it'll end the discussion and we'll move on. And if it's not, we'll come back to the original motion. Okay. Is everyone clear on what is being tabled by Councillor Hamlin and seconded by Councillor Doherty? We'll call the question then. All those in the affirmative. Okay. Those opposed? And that's defeated. That takes us back to the original motion, and that is Councillor Carrier. And Councillor Berman is still our seconder. You were looking to speak? Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. So just for clarification through to the CAO, I mean, I would be quite prepared to amend 20% to 30% if I thought that the CAO was indicating that staff would be okay with that going forward. If not, I will leave it at the 20% and let it go back to staff. But the other thing I'd like to add is that the estimated timeline to come back later this year or in the first quarter next year, I'd like that added in.
CEO Skinner, can you speak to the second part first and just confirm where things are at from a calendar perspective and the logistics of bringing something back in the time frame requested?
If I could ask Executive Director Peg to talk to that, please, the timeline for the percent recommendation versus the plan, and also Councillor Jeffrey's first question related to the 20 versus 30 as an initial minimum target today.
Great, thank you. Executive Director Peg.
Thank you, CEO Skinner. Through you, Mayor, to Council. In terms of the recommendation for today versus 30%, in order to meet the PCP requirement to move through the milestones, they require a target set, and it could say at least would meet that requirement. My recommendation would continue with the at least 20% with an understanding that that is an absolute minimum. And when we report back, we're happy to include what 30% would look like. The intention of having a minimum target is that council can set the final target with the financial implications provided with the plan at the same time, so that there's a complete picture when that approval is being sought. In terms of timeline, our hope is to come back with the percentage and the financials. And that would be early in the new year. So Q1 sounds great. Between now and then, without the financials, I'm not sure there's much, I'll say, new information that we would become aware of in the meantime without that financial component. So I would be hesitant to say we'll come back with a new percentile recommendation without having the time to review the financials and complete the really deep assessment on those opportunities and, as I mentioned, the potential budget impacts. So the at least 20% is understood to require all options up to net zero, and it would be reporting back to council Q1 of the new year. I feel is more than reasonable.
Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you. I'm okay if we stay with 20%, understanding that that's going to come back on Q1 for the next council. So.
Okay. Any final question, comment before I call the vote? Seeing none, I've got, again, Councillor Carrier, Councillor Berman is my mover and seconder, and I am calling the question as to what is printed within the agenda and what has been read out. All those in the affirmative. Those opposed? So noted. It's carried. Thank you. That takes us to the second item under 8.11. And this particular item related to the municipal administrative offices. I had Councillor Hamlin as my mover and Councillor Berman seconding. If you're okay with that, I'll keep the two of you in that place. Okay. Are there any, this is I think a fairly straightforward administrative matter, but are there any questions specific to this issue? Okay, seeing none, then I'll call the vote. Those in the affirmative? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Takes us to agenda item 8.2, Standing Committee Report. This one is specific to the Strategic Initiatives September the 6th meeting. And table this. This is the Council received the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee report from its meeting held September 6, 2022, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. CAO 2022-13 Interim Control Bylaw number 2021-024 Exemption Requests, Short-Term Exemption Program Intake, recommendation that the identified exemptions be considered at the September 19, 2022 Council meeting. CAO 2022-12 Affordable Housing Update, recommendation to approve the Rapid Accessory Dwelling Unit Deployment Program in principle and extend appreciation to the Affordable Housing Task Force for their continued commitment during the last 6 months and look forward to their continued leadership and affordable housing advocacy. CAO 2022-14 2022 Operational Plan, Q2 Progress Report, and Year 2 Progress Report on the Community-Based Strategic Plan, recommendation to receive. T 2022-10 2020 and 2021 Statement of Development Charge and Cash in lieu of Parkland Reserve Funds, recommendation to receive for information. T 2022-11 2023 Budget Preliminary Status Report, recommendation to receive. T 2022-12 2022 Q2 Financial Report and Forecast, again, recommendation to receive for information. C 2022-25 Joint Compliance Audit Committee, 2022 Municipal and School Board Election, Committee Establishment, Recruitment, and Terms of Reference. The bylaw number 2022-076, being a bylaw to establish and appoint a Joint Compliance Audit Committee, be enacted and passed this 20th day of September 2022. Can I get a mover and seconder for all of the above? I've got Councillor Jeffrey and I've got Councillor Berman. These are all together as they were approved unanimously at the committee level. Is there anyone feeling the need to have any of them separated? I haven't been told otherwise. Anybody have any looking for separation or?
Just have a question on one of them. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you. It's with respect to the second item, CAO 2022-12, the Affordable Housing Update. I have been mentioning to different people in the community the Accessory Dwelling Unit Rapid Deployment Program, and I must say there seems to be quite a bit of interest in it. So my question through you, Mr. Mayor, is what the timeline, if staff has any idea of the timeline when this program might be established. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to pass this through our CAO, and then perhaps we could have Jason Rayner join us. We also have a new staff member to this portfolio, and perhaps we could have an introduction to council and community at this time. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Rayner.
Hello, Council, Your Worship. Nice to see you all this evening. Delighted to introduce Jen Ray, our new Housing Development Coordinator. Jen has just joined us, and so she's still getting up to speed, but already impressed with her passion and community collaboration efforts. So just delighted, and I think Jen's with us as well, and so I'd invite her to turn on her camera and wave if she can, while I ask or answer your question about affordable housing and the rapid ADU program. The hope is that we can roll out components of the rapid ADU program as we're able to make those changes to the process, at least to the extent that it's internal administrative changes that are needed. But we'll be reporting back to council with anything that requires council's approval, of course, as soon as we can. But we are working through the internal processes. CAO Skinner can certainly clarify for us moving forward, but I would suspect that before the end of the year, we'll be back in front of council with an update report that specifically outlines the components that we've been able to accomplish in the near term, and then those that we'll continue to work on that will require a longer term timeline. For example, the zoning bylaw amendment may need to be adjusted, but that's going to take, of course, some time versus some of the internal review processes where we can do things concurrently as opposed to sequentially. May really speed up some of that timeline. So I hope that helps, and happy to answer any other questions, Your Worship, members of council.
Very much.
Okay, great. And I see that Ms. Ray has joined us. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to members of council. I'm thrilled to be part of Team Collingwood. I've just been here just over a week now, but from leadership to staff to community members, I can really see the passion and dedication to making tangible differences in the affordable housing crisis. So I'm looking very forward to working with the Affordable Housing Task Force to tackle this issue and build on all the good work that they've already done.
We are very pleased to have you here. I know that it was a position that was established some time ago, and I know that members of the task force were looking to the corporation to be able to fill the position. So we're thrilled that you're here. There was a very nice write-up in one of the local papers over the weekend, speaking to the issue, speaking to your passion and the expertise that you're bringing, and pleased to have you here. So welcome. And it looks like I've got a question here from the acting deputy mayor. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just more of a comment, really, regarding actually the same report, CAO 2022-12, the Affordable Housing Update, and the recommendation is that we thank the members of the task force and look forward to their continued leadership in affordable housing advocacy. And I wonder if it may not be time to transition this task force, because they've come up with the recommendations that they were tasked to do. And I wonder whether we transition this group into an advisory committee rather than a task force. We have Trails and Active Transportation. We have other advisory committees. I just wonder whether it is something to consider, and I'll ask that through the mayor, perhaps to the CAO or to the clerk. When does a task force become a committee?
It's a fair point. At our last meeting, we started a bit of a transition in the sense that we elected a new chair and vice chair, and pleased that Doug Linton will resume or take over as chair, and Jack Vanderkoy will assume the position of vice chair. And through their leadership, I hope that in whatever form or whatever we call it, they'll carry forward. But Clerk Almus, what does that evolution look like?
Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor Hull. And that's an excellent question. They could transition basically at any time, but the recommendation when we brought forward the affordable housing staff review of the task force recommendations back in February requested actually that they help and participate during the master plan preparation process, and the master plan would actually establish what type of governance committee would be best moving forward. So we're expecting out of that master plan exercise to have some clarity there, but truly they could transition anytime. They are a little bit more informal right now, having greater flexibility in their advocacy and community building consultation piece that may be necessary as they're helping with the master plan, but it's council's pleasure.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, comments related to either housing or any of the other items that were read in? Okay. So with that, I have Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Berman as my mover and seconder. And seeing no further questions, I'll call the vote. All those in the affirmative. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. That takes us then to item 9 on the agenda, which is staff reports. And for staff report, I'll read in, and then I'm going to ask that our CAO and staff provide some comment. 9.1 is the related to the semi-annual water and wastewater uncommitted hydraulic reserve capacity. and it reads as follows. That staff report PW 2022-18 semi-annual water and wastewater uncommitted hydraulic reserve capacity update be received, and that staff report PW 2022-18 be expedited to the 19th to September 19th, 2022 meeting of council, being tonight. And it is being expedited because it was at Development Operations on the 12th, which traditionally would go to the last meeting of the month, which is the 26th. So before I get a mover and seconder, CEO Skinner, would you like to provide some comment specific to this file?
Absolutely. Thank you, Your Worship. As a brief aside, I'm a little biased, but I do hope that some of our attendees in the gallery today who may have come for climate change or other issues are finding that council does a lot of fantastic things for our town, and it's always an interesting listen. The introduction I wanted to provide very briefly here, though, is because there's a bit of an overarching story among several of the reports that relate to our water and our water allocation, namely drinking water, but these do cover wastewater as well. And we have a few folks here to support the decisions should you have questions. Director Slama is here, not here tonight, I believe, but a lot of work was done by Manager McGinnity, the planning department, including Acting Director Ayers and Nathan Wukash, our Chief Building Official Hogg, and our finance team. The first report up is the semi-annual water and wastewater uncommitted hydraulic reserve capacity update. And in a nutshell, I've been updating council regularly for over a year on the water that's left. And resetting this amount may seem confusing at first. However, this is an expected reset. And as our developments move from the projected amount that's being exempted to being actual developments drawing water within Collingwood, we carefully match that capacity allocation with our observed use of water. And there was a recent update to our development standards by council that's been incorporated. So we've been carefully tracking these, and we'll continue to report back every 6 months. So what this report does in one portion of it is it sets the remaining water allocation cap recommended for council for the rest of 2022 at 205 single development units worth of capacity, which is about 20 some more than we had set earlier within the year, due to that change in standards and the some rigor in reviewing what had been put forward. There's also some exemption requests. So these are exemption requests to the interim control bylaw and the short-term exemption program intake number 2. So within those, there's about 53 SDUs for residential and ICI, which is industrial, commercial, missing an I, but you get the idea. Those, and as well as part of the short-term exemptions, there was a Summit View subdivision phase 3B, and this capacity was already within the ledger. It's 45 SDUs, so we're not counting it within the 205, but it has been taken into account in the proposals that are before you for potential approval tonight. There are also 2 major development applications that are coming forward with their water for development approvals and water approvals. One is the Victoria Annex, as it's called, at 400 Maple at 18 SDUs. And another one is the Sky Devco Apartments at 133 SDUs. Those, of course, when you get to those reports, will also have their associated planning and engineering considerations for council. But what I wanted to say is that the SDU allocations, with all those numbers I just went through, add up to 204, which if they were all approved tonight, would fill up our allocation for 2022 this year. There is an amount set out at 450 SDUs to be accessed in 2023. and more information will come to council promptly on our approach for those 2023 allocations by council. Thank you for the chance to introduce. I just wanted to put that big story together on how much water there is and the proposal of how council could use it tonight if they approved the recommendations from staff and those endorsed by committees leading up to tonight.
Thank you, CAO Skinner, and I appreciate that there are other members of the leadership team here tonight to potentially address questions as they arise. So I've read out item 9.1, and as the CAO indicated, there are a number of other items under staff reports that all sort of dovetail together as it relates to the capacity that we're able to offer. But I'm going to specifically look for a mover and seconder for 9.1. But if you have questions as we move forward, certainly there'll be a bit of latitude if you feel that there's a question you'd like to ask related to the item before us, but maybe has a connection to one of the other reports within this particular section of the agenda. And Councillor Hamlin, when we get to the next one, 9.2, we do have you identified with the one conflict, okay? So having read that out, 9.1, could I get a mover and seconder, please? I've got Councillor Jeffrey, I've got the Acting Deputy Mayor. Are there any questions to the first report? Okay, I will then call a question. All those voting in the affirmative. And that is carried unanimously. It takes us to the next one. And again, I'll read it, and we've separated the one property. So under 9.2, and this would be the intake number 2 program. That report CAO 2022-13 interim control bylaw number 2021-024 exemption requests short-term exemption program intake number 2 be received. And further that the lands identified below representing 13 exemption requests be exempt from the provisions of the interim control bylaw number 2021-24 and added to the bylaw Schedule A for the purposes and uses outlined in this report for a total municipal servicing capacity commitment of an estimated 53 single dwelling unit equivalents. And the 13, I'm now going to read in 12. The first would be 7779 Simcoe Street, 350 First Street, 64 3rd Street, 135 Hurontario Street, 431 Ontario Street, 307 4th Street West, 79 Summerview Avenue, 37 Calvary Crescent, 205 Long Point Road, 648 Mountain Road, 279 Robinson Street, 6920 Poplar Side Road, and 9745 Beechwood Road. And further that, the lands identified below representing one exemption request be exempt from the provisions of the interim control bylaw number 2021-24 and added to the bylaw Schedule A for the purposes and uses outlined in this report for total municipal servicing capacity commitment of an estimated 45 single dwelling unit equivalents, which have already been allocated per report PW 2022-18. The property or area is identified as Summitview Subdivision Plan 51M-1170, lots 1 through 41, and blocks 234, 235. Can I get a mover and seconder for the above? I've got Councillor Hamlin and I've got Councillor Carrier. Are there any questions specific to the two items? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in the affirmative. And that's carried unanimously. Okay, so that takes us to the next, and we'll have Councillor Hamlin step away. Thank you. We've got 6:21 p.m. and Councillor Hamlin identified this particular property previously at Development Operations as well as this evening. And the matter is that Golfview, it's a property within proximity of her residence. So the matter at hand is, and further that the lands identified below be exempt from the provisions of the interim control bylaw number 2021-024 and added into the bylaw Schedule A for the purposes and uses outlined in this report. And subject property is 11 Gulfview Drive. Mover and seconder, please. I've got Councillor Carrier, Councillor Jeffrey, and I'll call the vote. All those in the affirmative, and that is carried unanimously. And we'll have Councillor Hamlin return. And we'll note that the time is 6:22 after robust discussion and debate. That takes us then to 9.3. And this is that staff report P 2022-32, proposed site plan and draft plan approval of a vacant land condominium plan, 11403, 11453, and 11461 Highway 26 multi-residential development be received, and that draft approval of the vacant land condominium plan be granted subject to the draft plan drawing and conditions of draft plan approval attached as appendices E and F respectively. And further, that Unit 1 of the vacant land condominium plan be exempt from the provisions of the interim control bylaw number 2021-024 and added to the bylaw Schedule A for the purposes and uses outlined in this report for a total municipal servicing capacity commitment of an estimated 133 single dwelling unit equivalents. And further, that site plan application file number D11920 be approved subject to the owner entering into a site plan control agreement with the town and to the satisfaction of the acting director, planning, and town solicitor. And further, that the authorization by law to execute the above noted site plan control agreement for a multi-residential development at 11403, 11453, and 11461 Highway 26 be enacted. Further, that staff report P 2022-32 be expedited to the September 19, 22 meeting of council, that bylaw number 2022-077 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a site plan control agreement between 1964-245 Ontario Limited and the Corporation of the Town of Collingwood be enacted and passed this 20th day of September 2022. It's a mover and seconder, please. The acting deputy mayor, and I've got Councillor Carrier. Clerk Almas, I assume it's just a formality and it'll be adjusted at the times, or the dates, I should say. So it was expedited to September 19, obviously, and then we amended that to tonight. So that'll just be adjusted. Okay. Any questions specific to what's been read and tabled? Seeing none, I'll call the... Yes, Councillor Doherty.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There were two questions that were asked that staff had indicated they would follow up in time for this meeting. One was with regard to what it would take or how much capacity would be required to service the entire development as opposed to just the 3 apartment. That was number one. And I do see that staff did provide an answer, but I'm just verbalizing this. And then secondly, I asked a question relative to whether there was a mechanism whereby traffic flow north to south at the intersection between this development and the entrance to Lighthouse Point could be installed because, of course, Lighthouse Point is entirely private property. So just wondering if I can ask through you to staff if they could just provide the answers to those two questions.
Thank you. Yes, through CEO Skinner, I see that Acting Director Ayres has joined us. So perhaps maybe we could start with the second, and that's the traffic signalization.
Certainly. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Hall and members of council. So I will defer to Director Slammer shortly, but I would note that staff certainly did take the request of Councillor Doherty back and had further consideration for potential changes to the intersection to discourage the north-south traffic. From a planning perspective, one of the things that was noted was that there may be required north-south traffic movements with respect to visitors going from one community to the other, or employees going to work if they're working at one of the buildings or vice versa. So that was certainly one concern that was raised, and so it has been identified in the report that there was concern over fully discouraging that north-south traffic movement, as there may be invited guests, visitors, employees that need to access across the street. And certainly we would encourage them to walk or use active transportation for something that close, but not everyone is able to do so. So that was a consideration. And with respect to the traffic related matters, I will defer to Director Slama to provide some more information. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome, Director Slama. And my apologies. You'd think after 8 years I'd figure out which department looks after what. So go ahead.
No worries. Thank you, Worship. Yes, through you to Councillor Doherty. So we did look, engineering staff did look at the possibility of, one of the things we looked at is the potential of putting in an island on the egress lanes of Sky Devco that would just allow for left out or right out. And what we found is that the configuration of the right-of-way is too confined to allow for that. So it would require some additional land in the right-of-way. And in this particular location, it would require land on the east side of that entrance. And that's actually town-owned land, which we have earmarked for potential future expansion of our reservoir there. So, looking at the pros and the cons, we were in agreement with Acting Director Ayer's comments that, there is that potential that people may want to go north-south and see that kind of movement. So we don't see it as being really super beneficial for the number of residents that are going to be in Sky Devco. This entrance and this, I'll call it an intersection, but it's not a true intersection like our other road intersections. It will be similar in its alignment to what we'll see on Cranberry Trail East and the entrance into Rupert's Landing, right? So I think, I'm hopeful there won't be too much of a problem with those at Lighthouse Point, but it wasn't a simple fix. So our recommendation is not to move forward with it at this time.
Thank you, Director Slama. And it was indicated that the response to this first question was a part of the report, but did either of you want to add comment?
And I'll let Acting Director Ayers field that question, Your Worship.
Director Slama. So with respect to looking at, staff entertaining or looking further at the exempting the entire property or granting water servicing capacity allocation for the entire proposed development. As identified in the report Council recently received and approved, staff have identified that there are 205 single dwelling unit equivalents remaining for 2022. When we looked at the original staff recommendation that went to committee was for the 3 rental apartment buildings to be granted water servicing allocations through the 2022 allocation cycle. When we looked at incorporating the townhouse dwellings and the balance of the development, it wasn't just the 60 townhouse dwellings, which required 50 single dwelling units equivalents of water, but there's also an irrigation system particularly associated with the townhouse development that would require an additional 34 single dwelling unit equivalents of water. And as council has been made aware before, previously, exemptions to the interim control bylaw are for the entire property. So because of the structure of the vacant land condominium, we have been able to recommend an exemption specifically for the 3 apartment buildings and the attached amenity building. However, if we were to look at expanding it to the larger development in the entire vacant land condominium proposed this evening, we would be looking for a total 217 single dwelling unit equivalents of water, which exceeds the 205 SDUs that are currently identified through the report previously considered this evening. And it would also, not only would it exceed what we have identified as remaining, but it would preclude the exemption requests that council just considered prior to this report, as well as the subsequent report for the Victoria Annex property that is to follow. So we are maintaining our recommendation to approve the 3 rental apartment buildings this evening, as well as the associated amenity building. And certainly the proponents are welcome to come back when there's additional servicing capacity and attempt to obtain an exemption for the balance of the lands for the townhouse dwellings.
It's fantastic. Thank you, Acting Director Ayres. Councillor Doherty, any follow-up?
No, thank you very much. Appreciate the thorough answers.
Any further question, comment specific to this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. That takes us then to item 9.4. This is for 400 Maple Street, known as the Annex. And staff report P 2022-33, proposal deeming bylaw, zoning bylaw amendment and draft approval of a plan of subdivision, 400 Maple Street, the Annex be received. And that a deeming bylaw with the effect of deeming lots 10, 11, and 12 south side of 5th Street and lots 10, 11, and 12 north side of 6th Street, registered plan number 45, Town of Collingwood, as not being lots in a registered plan of subdivision attached as Appendix A, be enacted and passed. And further, that an amending zoning bylaw to rezone the subject lands from the residential 3rd density exemption 38 zone to the residential 3rd density exemption 64 R3 64 zone, and the residential 3rd density exemption 65 R33 65 zone attached as Appendix B be enacted and passed. And further, that 400 Maple Street being exempt from the previous provisions of the interim control bylaw number 2021-024 and added to the bylaw Schedule A for the purposes and uses outlined in this report for a total municipal servicing capacity commitment of an estimated 18 single dwelling unit equivalents. And further, the draft approval of the annex plan of subdivision be granted subject to the draft plan of subdivision drawing and the conditions of draft plan approval attached as Appendices C and D respectively. And further, staff report P 2022-33 be expedited to the September 1922 meeting of council, again this evening, that bylaw number 2022-078 being a bylaw to designate a plan of subdivision or part thereof not to be a registered plan of subdivision to the purpose of subsection 50 in brackets 3 of the Planning Act be enacted and passed this 20th day of September 2022. That bylaw number 2022-079 being a bylaw under the provision of section 34 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP 13 as amended be enacted and passed this 20th day of September 2022. That bylaw number 2022-080 being a bylaw to amend interim control bylaw number 2021-024 be enacted and passed this 20th day, September 2022. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Got Councillor Hamlin, I've got Councillor Jeffrey. Are there any questions specific to this file? Not seeing any then, I will call the vote. All those in the affirmative. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. So that ends the portion of reports that were expedited to this evening. And it's exciting to see that those two developments in particular will move forward through the process. So with that, it takes us to item 10 on the agenda. Under motions, we have 3 this evening. And the first one was provided by Councillor Jeffrey on the 18th of August of 2022. Councillor Jeffrey, I'll turn it over to you to table and then look for a seconder.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. So that council appoint Acting Deputy Mayor McLeod as Deputy Mayor for the duration of the current term of council.
Do we have a seconder for this? We have Councillor Carrier. Are there any questions on the matter? 2, Councillor Doherty, Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will be speaking against this motion, but I want to be very clear that I am speaking against the motion and not the individual, because Acting Deputy Mayor McLeod has done an outstanding job jumping into this role. However, in my view, it was important to appoint an successor to the former mayor, given the distinct role of mayor as head of council and the chief executive officer of the municipality, and the special responsibilities that that role entails as enabled by the Municipal Act. However, the role of deputy mayor has no such unique role or responsibilities other than to act on behalf of the mayor in the mayor's absence. And so I feel no need to appoint the de facto deputy mayor, particularly at this very late point in the term of this council, barely a month before the election. I feel that it puts all of the members of this council in quite an untenable position, choosing among 2 potentially unpopular choices. And again, just be very clear that this is about principles, not personalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Councillor Hamlin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo what Councillor Doherty has said, and I know it's an odd thing for me to weigh in on, but I've had a number of people reach out to me in the last 2 days and ask me to speak to this. I know when Councillor Jeffrey introduced this motion, she explained that it was a mouthful to say acting deputy mayor. And of all the people, I love plain speaking and I love eliminating words. And I understood that the import of this was to not also to always have to keep saying acting. But it behooves us to look further and to see what the impact of this vote is. And I would, it goes without saying that our acting deputy mayor is one of 3 people, including myself, who are running to be the leader of this community, and voting starts in 18 days. I have heard lots of comments, and this is what I've heard. It's inappropriate, and one person's word was outrageous, indeed, for council to be interfering in the election process by giving a nod to one candidate running for mayor and elevating that role so that she can present herself as something more than the electors had given her in the last election. Council, by approving this motion, is in fact inserting itself in the election process, as I say, just 18 days before voting will start in our community. So, and again, this is not a personality issue. This is a process issue and how we have to maintain the integrity of our election process and not interfere with it. And so I will not be supporting this, and I will also be asking for a recorded vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The request for a recorded vote has been noted. Councillor Carrier?
Thank you. Just a quick comment first. It would have been nice if those folks that had expressed concern maybe sent an email to all of us and put their names to those anonymous comments.
Well, they were calls to me. They weren't letters.
Anonymous comments at the table are anonymous comments. I sat as a mayor, and I know what it's like to have somebody alongside you that you should be able to trust. I didn't have that. And I know that Brian Saunderson had that. And I know that Keith Hall, your worship, you have that. As the councillor who finished first in the last election, Councillor McLeod has done yeoman's work preparing for county council meetings, despite whether you had to go, because you didn't know until often the last minute. You've done the work. You've stepped in. You've been there when the community has asked you to be there, because that was your privilege, having finished first in the last election. I have had a comment to me about, well, of course you're going to support Marion. She's your friend. I have a number of friends in politics, people that I call friends and that I'm friends with. And I do disagree with friends. And my good friends know that I have my own opinions and I make my own decisions. And I don't barter, I don't trade, I don't own a debt to anybody to make a political decision. I'm proud to support Marion McLeod as the deputy mayor for the remainder of the term, as I am proud to support Mayor Hall as mayor for the remainder of the term. Both of you have shown yourselves to be trustworthy and worthy of the roles that the community has looked to be filled in the absence of whatever has happened at this table. So I will be supporting the motion as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Carrier. I'm going to go to Councillor Berman first, and then I've got the acting deputy. Go ahead, Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. My comments don't really have anything to do with the person. It has to do with the process that got us here. We've known for going on a year and a half. I have a note that it was June 2021 that Mayor Saunderson was named the PC candidate. We go on to the deputy mayor being on leave, you being on leave and coming back, and then Councillor Carrier being appointed on March the 10th. I don't want to talk about anything that got to that point. It was just to make the point that we saw this succession type of thing coming. We voted back on May the 2nd about declaring seats vacant. We, Councillor Jeffrey and I looked this up today. We were the only two that voted in favor of declaring the seat vacant prior to the day that you took it. This has all caused a lot of confusion. As anybody that walks into town hall can go to Mayor Hall's office and see that he's got a list of names that he's been referred to taped up outside of his door. So I agree that the mouthful of words has been an issue, but we only, well, I guess through you to the clerk, if I may, Mayor Hall, there's only 2 council meetings left between now and the election day, I believe, September 26th and October 17th. Is that correct?
Clerk Almas, if you would kindly confirm that, please.
That is correct.
Thank you.
And if this is approved tonight, would it require a bylaw to be passed at the next council meeting, September 26th?
Again, if you would confirm that, please.
Thank you. Yes, a resolution will be required to declare a councillor seat as vacant.
Okay, so then if it's approved and acting Deputy Mayor McLeod is named official deputy mayor, it would be for 1 meeting prior to the election, October 17th. I'd be inclined to abstain. I don't think this should even be on the table, but an abstention is a no vote. So for the reasons of this flawed process of succession over the past year and a half, I won't be supporting this.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple of comments, but I didn't ask you if you wanted to go first or last, and I apologize for that. So
I'm going last now, clearly.
Okay. I do have a couple of comments, and I'll try and be brief. I will just preface my comments by saying that I will support the wording of the motion that is presented tonight. Councillor Berman, I do agree with the comment that you made as it relates to the date in May and the decision that was made at that time. And I acknowledge that it was you and Councillor Jeffrey that voted to expedite the process and fill the positions at that time as opposed to waiting. And in hindsight, I think the thought that was going through my mind at that time was that I didn't necessarily feel comfortable voting on the spot to, elevate myself, even though I had that right from a procedural standpoint. But I do think it would have helped provide better continuity, not only around this table, but in working with staff and throughout the community. But more importantly, it is a recognition, and I will use myself as an example and then come back to the particular motion. Throughout this process, I've kind of said on a couple of occasions with tongue in cheek that I felt a bit like Rodney Dangerfield. And the famous quote, of course, as it relates to respect. And two individuals in this room, one at the table and one within staff, both said on a couple of occasions, it is a big deal. And that, recognizing oneself, but also the position and ensuring it's properly filled and supporting that individual so that they can do the job properly is important. And so I sort of got my head around that, and I hope that I have been able to do so in the last period of time as we wind our time down here at the table. The acting deputy mayor was elected to the top of the table. And it's something within our municipal election system that is rarely spoken of. And that is that there are many people in the community, when they cast a ballot, that don't even appreciate the fact that they're electing a mayor and deputy mayor to represent them at the county. Let alone do they acknowledge the fact that the person who ends up top of ballot ends up as our number one representative in an alternate capacity. And since the outset of the term, I would echo your comments, Councillor Carrier, that the councillor, now acting deputy mayor, has been prepared, and when required, from time to time, but also specifically when I took leave, did so in a professional manner and represented the town of Collingwood properly. Despite the fact that we are approaching the 12th or the other hour of this term, there are a number of things that still have to be executed. And most recently, we actually passed a recommendation to move forward with a significant development opportunity to the province. And in doing so, we also recognize the importance that mayor and acting deputy mayor be our voice in representing the community council when speaking with the province and counterparts from a government level and in working in concert with staff as we try to move the wishes forward that were passed here at council. So I think it is important that, and it's unfortunate that, and I take full responsibility as one of those persons that did not vote with you, Councillor Berman, Councillor Jeffrey, back in May, that we unnecessarily have muddied the waters. But that should not take away from the contribution of the person, and therefore, I think, for the balance of the term, no matter how short it may be, I think that we should have both mayor and a deputy mayor, and I would fully support having our current acting deputy mayor have the acting dropped for the balance of the term. Acting Deputy Mayor McLeod, and then Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. I just would like to confirm that I have conferred with the Integrity Commissioner on this issue, and they have told me that I have the right to vote.
Councillor Jeffrey, you've reserved the request to speak last.
So thank you, Mayor Holland. I appreciated your comments and summation because, as I explained at the time, I gave notice of the motion. For me, this is simply housekeeping. If a person is doing the job, if this were a staff member, we would remove the acting as soon as they were doing the job without anyone coming up behind in their contract to do it. So it was simply housekeeping. I'm saddened that people have managed to politicize such a simple thing, and I just stand by the fact that if the person's doing the job, no matter who they are, that we respect it. And I did facetiously say that it would be good to find them not be having to have these long titles for all of our members of council. But respectfully, I think it's a housekeeping thing. It's not a political thing. I'm sad that people are doing that. And I agree with Councillor Berman's, although we disagree on how we're going to vote on this, I do agree that it kind of got brought down upon ourselves by not understanding what we were voting on, all of us understanding what we were doing at the time. So I'll let my motion stand, and hopefully council can support recognizing somebody for all the extra work they've already done, and really this should have been sooner. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we've got you as the mover, Councillor Carrier as the seconder, and a request for a recorded vote has been made. And so I will then turn it over to our clerk to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're proceeding with a recorded vote on the motion. All those in favor, please raise your yes cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your no cards. Perfect. Thank you. Motion is carried.
Okay, thank you. The next item then is 10.2, and it is the notice that was provided on the 18th of August by Councillor Doherty with regards to consideration of Indigenous art. And Councillor Doherty, I'll ask you to read in your motion, and we'll look for a seconder.
Thank you, Chair. Whereas Council has approved the BIA Board of Management's recommendation to proceed with the gateway feature concept that utilizes the town's public art policy, with a focus of the feature becoming an integrated public art installation anchoring the downtown core. And whereas on Orange Shirt Day and throughout the month of September, Canadians are called upon to reflect on the findings of and the learnings from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And whereas the town of Collingwood has been committed to support the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendation to improve recognition and education on the local Indigenous cultures and histories, and to affirm the role of Indigenous peoples in our region. Therefore, be it resolved that Council request that the BIA ensure that in accordance with the public art policy, that Indigenous art be considered in the call for public art for a gateway feature in the downtown. And further, that town staff continue to pursue the addition of art reflective of Indigenous culture in visible community locations within municipal projects to enhance our public art inventory in celebration of the Indigenous peoples of the region for their contributions to the land we call home, past, present, and future.
Councillor Doherty, do you have a seconder? Are we looking for a seconder? We'll look for a seconder then. I've got Councillor Carrier. Would you like to speak first or last to your motion?
I'll speak last. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments then? Yes, Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. I wasn't sure if I wasn't holding the camera in front of the lens. Through you to the CAO or whoever the appropriate staff would be, I just want to make sure that this isn't redundant. In other words, it's giving some direction to the BIA. It's referencing the public art policy, and I honestly don't know it off by heart. And it's giving direction to town staff. And I don't have a problem with the intent of the motion. I just want to know through staff, are we already doing all of this, or does this provide them new direction? And I'll look forward to the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. CAO Skinner, is Director Culver with us or no? Okay.
Director Culver's away this evening, and I think the clerk will respond. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Berman. Director Culver and myself have worked with Councillor Doherty regarding this motion. It's somewhat redundant. We just have to be very cautious when we're doing a recognition for Indigenous artwork, to ensure that not only is it inclusive of our community, but it's not seen as a tokenism piece of art in the community, that it's integrated and it has a full understanding and appreciation of the value and the culture that's behind it. So within our public art policy, we actually we're not specific in the call of public art about that, nothing is prohibited. So in working with the BIA, we think that we could be a little bit more inclusive, ensuring that the public and the artists know that all forms of art will be included. So I think there's, for a chance to reflect a little bit more clarity in our call for public art. And yes, the second component too, I believe this is something that the Parks, Rec and Culture Department does normally when they're looking at playground features or features such as the Alwyn Center, is trying to incorporate Indigenous artwork. And I think noting that it's in visible community locations is something that they're working on, but it doesn't hurt to reaffirm that commitment.
Thank you. Follow up, Councillor Berman. Did he nod his head one way? No? Okay, thank you.
No, thank you, Mayor Hall.
Okay. Is there anyone else that has a question, comment? Okay. So if I may, I do have a couple of questions from a general standpoint as council's representative to the BIA. And it's more just for council, I think, knowledge. But Clerk Almas, if I may, one of the concerns that was initially raised, so prior to the tabling of this motion, was that when we provided direction for staff to work with the BIA staff and come up with a new direction, that when that was presented through through Director Culver and staff at one of the initial BIA meetings after that direction was provided, that they were a little surprised at the timeline that it would take to execute what they were looking to do based on the use of the art policy. Does that change in any way the timeline, or would it hamper the timeline in terms of what they're looking to do?
Thank you. That is a great question. Yes, I recognize that the BIA did have some concerns with the timelines. I think this is just an enhancement to it. The call for the public art has not been issued at this point, so I think it can still be included within the wording and the language within that document. So I don't think that there will be any further or additional delay.
Okay. And if I may, just a second question would be that one of the sort of the issues around this particular opportunity is that it was contingent on funding through a grant from the federal government. The intent, and I think the answer is no, but I'd just like to confirm, would not jeopardize that grant?
That is the intention, Your Worship. That it would not jeopardize the grant.
Perfect. Okay. The only other comment I would just like to make is a positive comment, and that is that through the previous council, in which you were a part of, Councillor Doherty, and the staff, this council and staff, I think that the town of Collingwood continues to lead. The work is not done, but I'm simply just recognizing that we do continue to lead. And I'm very pleased that through the Alwyn Gathering, through the park that's going to be adjacent to the Alwyn Gathering, to what is being built and what we will be opening in October down at Sunset Point, including an art piece within that park, to the 2 artisans that have now been retained specific to the water treatment plant. We're going in the right direction. So I just mentioned that as the motion refers to the month of September and the significance in recognition of the month of September as it relates to a better understanding of the past, as it relates to the injustices and the Indigenous communities across their land, that we are cognizant. And again, I applaud both the previous and this council for the work that's been done, and hope that the intent of this particular motion is taken as is, and potentially could be used as something for consideration as it relates to other art installations throughout the community. Councillor Doherty, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you. Yes, so it's true that the town has been very committed to supporting the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and all of its recommendations. And we see evidence of this in the Alwyn Gathering installation and the many activities in which we have been involved throughout the year, shared with the Indigenous peoples of this town. But it was struck home to me recently at the AMO conference that out of 444 municipalities in Ontario, virtually every one of them is established on lands that were once governed by the Indigenous people of that land. And yet very few municipalities offer any recognition of that fact as part of their community culture and history. And my thinking originally with downtown was because our downtown is the center of our history. And we have in the past celebrated, oh, sorry, can you still hear me? Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Yep, definitely. Loud and clear.
Okay, my machine is almost out of power. At any rate, we have celebrated our colonial history. Why not celebrate the history before colonialism in the center of our town? And thus came my recommendation. But recognizing that there may be other opportunities throughout the municipality, I certainly have acknowledged that our public art policy and addition to our public art inventory would be appropriate regardless of its location ultimately in this community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Doherty. If there are no other comments, and giving Councillor Doherty the last word, we do have the motion tabled and presented by Councillor Doherty, seconded by Councillor Carrier. I will call the vote. All those in the affirmative. And that is passed unanimously. Thank you. That takes us to 10.3, and it's with regards to an active transportation fund agreement. And I don't see Clerk Holmison, if you just clarify. And I apologize, I should have asked in advance. What's the genesis in terms of, was this tabled by an individual, or is this?
I actually, Your Worship, I believe one of our directors, this is a requirement, maybe Treasurer Quinlan could address it. It is a requirement to receive the funding, I believe, for these The bicycle facility is located on Cameron and Collins Street. Oh, Director Slama.
Okay. Okay, so it is a motion that's coming through from staff with an attached bylaw. Okay. So then I'll put it verbally on the table that the town of Collingwood confirm that it meets all the requirements of the Canada Active Transportation Fund Agreement, and that the clerk be authorized to execute the agreement on behalf of the town of Collingwood. And again, this is in relation to the Active Transportation Fund Agreement feasibility study for new bicycle facility on Cameron and Collins Street. Can I get a mover and seconder to put this on the table? I've got Councillor Jeffrey. I've got Councillor Berman. Is there any question, comment specific to this item? Staff want to offer comment.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just briefly, we're pleased to be receiving these funds to be able to do the feasibility study noted.
Okay, perfect. And did you have a question? Yes, sir.
Just a question of clarification. Was this done by a report at one point? I don't recall it. That's all. I hate using those words. I don't recall. Ain't it for me?
Yep. CEO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't believe that there was a report. This is a result of applying for funds, but I do see Director Slama is available and may have some more information.
Okay. Director Slama. Yeah, sorry.
Just for a more fulsome answer, does it meet the requirements of a procurement bylaw? Like if we're going out to get a study, we're spending resources, but it sounds like it's money from somebody else as opposed to ours. I just want to make sure it complies with our procurement policy.
Okay. So we could add that to the question, please. So Director Slama.
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Carrier. So we did not bring this forward in a report. When we saw the opportunity for some funds for active transportation, we looked at potential projects in line with the cycling plan in particular, and through discussion with members of the Trails and Active Transportation Advisory Committee, it was recommended with staff that we bring forth this feasibility study that would look at cycling facilities on Collins and Cameron, which is a project identified in the cycling plan. So that's how we brought that forward. This money will fund 80% of the work of the cost of a feasibility study. And we have the funds within our operating budget to provide the additional $10,000, I believe. And to answer Councillor Carey's question with respect to our procedural bylaw, we will be, our procurement bylaw, sorry, we will be complying with our procurement bylaw. We'll either use an engineer on our roster through our engineering roster, or if we feel that it might be better served to go to open market for these services, then we will go that route. So we're able to follow our own procurement processes in receiving these funds.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you, Director Slama. Are there any other questions? Okay, then I'll call the vote. Those in the affirmative? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. That takes us then to 11 of the agenda, which are our bylaws. We do have one bylaw. It happens to follow the last motion that was just tabled and passed. And it is also a first as it relates to the wording. The bylaw number 2022-081, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement between the Corporation of the Town of Collingwood and His Majesty the King Charles III in right of Canada for feasibility study for a new bicycle facility on Cameron and Collins Street, Collingwood, Ontario, be enacted and passed this 20th day of September 2022. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? I've got Councillor Hamlin and Councillor Carrier. Are there any questions related to the bylaw? Yes, sir.
just like to point out, because I like to point out these little idiosyncrasies. In your very short tenure as Mayor of Collingwood, you signed the New Tech Agreement. You've entered into negotiations with our First Nations community, and now you're going to be signing a bylaw, the first, with His Majesty the King on it. Congratulations. You are certainly to be noted in history for a number of significant events. Congratulations. Well earned.
Thank you. Do you think His Majesty's having a similar conversation on the other side of the pond?
I would suggest that you don't use a fountain pen.
Yes. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. So I've got a mover and seconder. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Are there any notices of motion? I wasn't given notice in advance, but anyone with a notice of motion this evening? That takes us to item 13, county report. I don't have anything specific. There was a meeting, or the highlights, I should say, have been posted as it relates to the 9th of August. I'll look to soon to be Deputy Mayor. Are there any comments that you would like to offer?
Yeah, just one, actually. I was really happy to see a report come to County Council on the 13th of September regarding the Ontario Renovates program. And this is a program which makes up to $15,000 available to lower income families who want to add a secondary suite or an accessory dwelling unit to their home as a way not only of providing additional affordable housing in the communities across Simcoe County, but also as a income generator for those lower income homes, and so homeowners rather. So just a couple of changes happened to this particular program. It's part of the county's 10-year affordable housing and homelessness prevention strategy, and details about it are available from anybody who wants to talk to one of the customer service ambassadors at Simcoe County. But I think it's something that we need to push a little harder to show more people that it's available to them.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions that are specific to the county? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move to our consent agenda under 14. We've got 3 this evening, and I'll table the 3 to be received. The council herein receive the general consent agenda, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent items are that of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. Item 14.1 is a proclamation, and it's in relation to the Franco-Ontario Day, September the 25th, 2022. Item is 14.2, and that is the proclamation as it relates to National Forest Week, September 18 to 24, 2022. And item 14.3, Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, Simcoe Muskoka Opioid Strategy, and it's the SMOS final report. I am going to look for a mover and seconder to table these to be received. We've got Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Berman. I'm calling the question to receive these 3 items. Those in the affirmative? That's unanimous. Is there any item that someone would like to pull for discussion or potentially redirection or direction? Seeing none, then we'll move on to 15, council business. 15.1, old or deferred business. Are there any items under old or deferred business? Seeing none, 15.2, other business. Okay, I've got 2. I've got Councillor Hamlin, and then I've got Councillor Carrier, and then I've got Councillor Berman. Go ahead, Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Director Slama. As we know, there's a new community on the west side of High, the Summit View community, where there's a lot of young families there that travel to the 2 schools on Finley, and they have to cross High every day, and some of them would like to walk or bike with their kids, or if the kids were a bit older, they'd have them go themselves. But there's no lights or pedestrian crossing at High, and Finley currently. So my question is if the director could explain if there are any plans in the works to allow for a safe crossing for pedestrians there. Thank you.
Director Slama?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Councillor Hamlin, there has been some discussion on the installation of traffic signals at High and Finley, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the road on the west side. That might be Pluis Drive. If I may, I'd like to just confirm my understanding with Acting Manager Stuart West, and I can report back to council next week.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carrier?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have 4 hopefully really quick questions. The first 2 are for the clerk, and the next 2 are for Director Slama. I was coughing a bit earlier today during the meeting, and it's because somebody in the room was wearing very heavy cologne. My wife has asthma, so I've not worn cologne or that for over 15 years. Do we have a scent-free policy in the town?
Really through Your Worship. Actually, I believe it's an HR policy, but I believe we do.
Is it posted? Is it posted before you come into council chambers, or in other town halls where I've done?
I don't believe it is, but we can explore that. And again, it's a scent-free policy for employees. I'll have to confirm and report back to council next week.
Okay. The second question, through Your Worship, is regarding the agenda that we received on Friday. We normally receive the agendas on Thursday, and I know that the meeting was rightfully moved to the Tuesday. Was there a reason why we couldn't have still received the meeting on or the agenda package on Tuesday? Or sorry, on Thursday instead of the Friday? It just allows some of us in the private sector a little more opportunity to access it.
To address that inquiry, we would have loved to have it out on Thursday, but there was a few final tweaks that had to be added to some of the amendments of the staff reports. So rather than issuing an addendum after the fact, it was issued on Friday. But we do strive to still have it out earlier if possible.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, I think all of us had received an email about the trees in the parking lot on 2nd Street. Has there been Director Slama, through the mayor to Director Slama, has there been an answer back to Ms. Anderson regarding those concerns and where the direction is going on the development of that parking lot?
Let Director Slama answer the question, but I do believe that it was answered. Go ahead, Director Slama.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I was actually going to defer to CAO Skinner, because I believe she was copied on.
Yes,
Sure.
the intention is to replace the trees, but I have not replied directly to Ms. Anderson, so we should do that. Thank you for the suggestion.
Okay, thank you. I readily admit I'm a little behind on my emails. I've been traveling extensively. The last question is, I did receive a concern about the ongoing odors at the sewage treatment plant. In the capital budget moving forward, I must say, when I was mayor and when Terry Geddes was mayor, when the shipyards development was being done, part of the master development agreement with them, that there was going to be funds set aside so that we could reduce the odors. And I know that there was digester problems, and that created an abundance of putrid odors. Is it a solution? So I've been away 12 years now back for a few months, and it's still not resolved. Is there going to be a solution that is going to better serve the residents and the visitors to our community as we move through the capital budget process for the next term of council, through the mayor to Director Slama?
So again, that particular matter was brought before, and Director Slama and Manager McGinnity provided a pretty thorough update, and I'm just trying, it escapes me. I believe it was development operations. I stand to be corrected, which you're not at, so I appreciate that. So is there a way that you could sort of capture the high-level points for us, Director Slama?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I will certainly try to capture the high-level points because as Mayor Hall mentioned, Manager McGinnity did provide an update at Development and Operations Committee last week. So there would be an opportunity for you to go back and listen to that update. But Manager McGinnity spoke to some of the work that's already been done at the wastewater treatment plant. And I would say over the last, 8 to 10 years, right? There was maybe 10 years ago, there was the housing of the where the trucks come in to offload the septage waste. So that's now all contained in a building. It has odor controls. That's where a lot of odors are emitted from, the very beginnings of a plant, the headworks. And then more recently, there was work completed at the wastewater treatment plant, which included putting covers on the primary clarifiers and installing another odor control unit that is linked to the digesters. Certainly what we're experiencing in Collingwood in 2022 is mostly related to the digesters. And it's just unfortunate that, what started as good work, as staff doing good work, and at the end of last year, looking to empty the one digester and make sure that we're doing some maintenance, some much required, maintenance work on that. And recommencing what should be, an every 5-year process. We started with that on digester 1, and then we had our overpressurization issue of digester 2. So it even though that staff have been a little bit rushed in reestablishing those biological processes in a manner that will really see a reduction in the odors, we are still having some odors. So, Manager McGinnity, I thought, spoke very well in acknowledging the effort that, our experienced staff, right, and educated staff are doing to address the odors today, but also to better understand some of those intricate processes and what would be better for Collingwood, right, in the longer term. And they have done some really good work in the background that I know the residents aren't aware of, but they continue to try and address these odors. You won't see anything in the 2023 budget at the wastewater treatment plant that is specifically earmarked for the odors, but you will see some items that are related to the digesters. And I'll just repeat again that once we go through this process and improve the structural aspects of our digesters and get our new roof on there, then there might be opportunities for staff to look at, is there an even better way to look at the odors from that back end of the process, that digested sludge part of the process. So what I can do is, it's always good to remind staff that in that headworks building, that the main doors are closed. Sometimes the haulers that move in and out, sometimes they don't close the doors. So I can certainly, that can be a mention, but I would support that staff are doing everything that they can. And unfortunately, it is a wastewater treatment plant, and we're always going to experience some odors, and we are trying to minimize it. And staff are, residents are certainly should continue to communicate, if they're experiencing some bad odors, right? Because that's important for our staff to know as well.
And I don't want to dump on the current staff because I know that back when Terry was mayor and then me as well. Like we were dealing with those issues, and I do recall one time one of the roofs, they said burped, and it was an pleasant situation at that time. So I appreciate the continued investment, and I'm sure that the next council will work to resolve this issue even further. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Director Slama. Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. I realized as we've been sitting here that I made a community announcement that's no longer accurate. So I just wanted to update it for the record that the Collingwood Blues beat Brantford 6-3 and remain undefeated at 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other business this evening? Yes, Clerk Almas.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to make it absolutely clear that the motion that passed tonight does make it official that Marion is considered the deputy mayor effective of the motion this evening, regardless that the motion to declare the councillor seat vacant will occur next week.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. With that, then, it takes us to our confirmatory bylaw. And that is that the bylaw number 2022-083, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held September 20, 2022, be enacted and passed this 20th day of September 2022. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? Got Councillor Hamlin, Councillor Berman. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Councillor Jeffrey, I missed you at SIC, and welcome back. Take us home.
I move adjournment.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Hall.
Great. We are adjourned. I guess we could.